Do Chinese SOEs directly represent the Chinese state? In my last video, I briefly touched on the relations between the Chinese Communist Party and China's massive state-owned enterprises, amongst the biggest companies in the world. I had been vague about what that means. Here we will dial into it a little deeper. So you see a company like CCCC, China Communications Construction Company, a $60 billion company responsible for building out many of the massive construction projects that make up China's Belt and Road Initiative. And you think, well, that's the company doing what the party wants it to do. You can imagine in your head some smoke-filled room where the heads of all 102 companies owned by SASAC, the multi-trillion-dollar state council that oversees them, meeting up every Friday to take guidance directly from Chairman Xi about what to do next. The problem with this view, though, is that the evidence for it actually being true is rather sparse. We assume it is true more because it ties into our fears that the Chinese party state is this massive glassy black monolith. The reality seems that even now, with Xi Jinping seemingly more in charge than ever before, the SOEs have much greater autonomy and voice than what you might expect. The party's most important formal levers of control over its SOEs come through, basically, human resources. SASAC is more of a big red human resources department than you might think. One of their most important formal duties is to help fill the top leadership of the portfolio SOEs, including both their regular corporate management members as well as the parallel controlling party committees. Both are essential. The corporate jobs run the company's day-to-day business, while the party committee ensures the company's loyalties to the party, and there is extensive overlap. Rotating management in and out of their roles among SOEs, like is seen here, is a good way to keep the blood fresh and prevent potential zones of power from building up. But policy implementation is not just a one-way street. The Communist government has increasingly opened up policy implementation to a variety of voices, including that of its SOEs and their affiliated research institutions, and even that of influential individuals. This might be a little surprising, and it is a change from when Mao and Deng would make all the major decisions by themselves. The reason for this is that while the party is big, China is bigger, and CEOs of major companies do have the ability and need to have their voices heard and their policies implemented. SASAC is a ministry-level agency, yes, but so are many of the most important SOEs that are under its technical supervision. And many of the SOEs exist in their current corporate state because they had been converted so from former bureaucracies, while retaining their former power centers and aligned party families. So even though the lines of influence have changed on paper, the lines of influence in reality have not. And as they famously say about doing business in China, rules 1 and 2 are that relationships are everything. Occasionally, we find signs that the SOEs, for all their power, have a hard time getting their voices heard by the party leadership. Just like in America, large SOEs lobby for favorable treatment. CNPC and Sinopec are both $362 billion companies, some of the biggest in the world. But many important factors that for US companies are major concern are out of their control. For example, the reason CNPC and Sinopec both make $362 billion each is because the domestic price of oil is set not by the market, but instead by the National Development and Reform Committee of the State Council. They are passive price takers and need to agitate the party leadership if that price needs to be changed. Such concerns are not always addressed. An interview with an anonymous chairman of one such SOE makes the point crystal clear. I listen to what the party says, watch what my counterparts in Europe and North America do, and do what I think is best for my corporation. The party's instructions are rarely specific. Sometimes Chinese CEOs are parsing through Xi's statements as much as we in the West are, and they need to be translated for the specific circumstances of the SOE's business and industry. So when the core leader declares that something needs to be done, like for example, with the chairman's recent announcement of technological self-reliance, the SOEs listen and work towards fulfilling that something, but not always in the way that can be expected by both parties. Not convinced? Here's some more proof. We can look at the rise and fall of these massive Chinese conglomerates like Hainan Airlines and Anbang. Fueled by cheap debt and money and motivated by the party's vague instruction to become international, they bought billions of dollars of global assets, including property in Hong Kong, America, and movie theater chains. A few years later, the party had the government take over Anbang and jailed its chairman for fraud. These massive conglomerates are now hitting reverse as fast as they went forward in the first place. Clearly, a policy error has occurred, an indication that China does not have as much control over its companies as we assume it does, especially when it comes to their actions overseas. So, all in all, making economic policy in China is ugly, messy, and dirty, much like how it is everywhere else in the world.